The galaxy was supposed to be peaceful that day. The great chamber of the Galactic Council floated above a blue gas giant, glowing with light from 1,000 civilizations. Delegates filled the seats, tall ones with silver skin, tiny ones floating in protective fields, and everything in between. Each came with the same hope, that humanity would finally respond. The humans had not answered any calls for weeks. Not one message, not one appearance. They had vanished from every diplomatic channel as if someone had switched off an entire species. Yet everyone knew they hadn't disappeared. Humans never went quiet unless they were planning something. In the middle of the grand chamber, the council's high speaker tried to keep order. His voice trembled slightly as he addressed the crowd. "Representatives, please. We must remain calm. Humanity will not abandon the council. They are only reassessing their position." But no one believed him. The chamber filled with murmurs and whispers, languages overlapping into a noise of fear. The humans had always been unpredictable but never silent. That silence was worse than any threat. For years, the council had relied on Earth as both an ally and a warning. Humans had a strange way of balancing power. They never claimed to lead, but their presence alone kept the peace. No one dared to start a war while the human fleets existed. They didn't have the largest navy, but they had something far more dangerous, a reputation. The council remembered the stories. When pirates attacked the frontier worlds, it was human ships that arrived first. When a superpower tried to enslave a smaller race, it was the humans who destroyed the invaders' fleets without hesitation. They never asked for tribute or land. They just said one thing: don't do it again. And no one ever did. So when Earth's diplomats suddenly withdrew from every embassy, the galaxy froze. The council called for an emergency meeting. They told themselves it was just political tension, a misunderstanding, or maybe a change in government. But as the hours passed and no one from Earth answered, panic began to grow. A small voice broke the silence from one of the rear seats. "What if they're done with us?" The question hung in the air. Everyone knew what done meant. It didn't mean war, it meant something worse. It meant humanity had decided to leave the council behind. And if they did that, what would stop the galaxy from tearing itself apart? The high speaker tried to regain control. "We will send another diplomatic fleet," he said, his tone forced and shaky. "They will go to Sol system, meet Earth's leaders, and—" But before he could finish, a delegate from a border world stood up. "With respect, Speaker, the last fleet we sent to Sol wasn't even allowed to enter orbit. Earth's defense grid locked onto them before they got near Mars. They told them to turn back. And they did." The room erupted. Dozens of voices shouted at once. Some demanded sanctions. Others screamed for calm. The speaker pounded the desk, but no one listened. The meeting was chaos. Fear had taken over reason. And then suddenly the lights dimmed. Every screen in the chamber flickered to black. The translation feeds went silent. One by one, every system connected to the council's central network went offline, except one. A single feed appeared on the main display. It was a transmission coming directly from Earth. The chamber went silent. A figure appeared, faceless, expressionless, only a silhouette against a bright blue background. The voice that followed was unmistakably human, deep and calm. "This is a message from the Terran Command," it began. "To the Galactic Council and all allied powers." Every representative leaned forward, hearts pounding. The humans were finally speaking, but the tone of the message was not friendly. "We have observed the actions of the Council." The voice continued. "We have seen the endless talks, the backroom deals, the false promises of peace. We have listened, watched, and waited. But our patience is over." A murmur spread through the chamber. The humans were not asking, they were declaring. "We will no longer take part in your diplomacy. We will not send ambassadors. We will not negotiate through corruption or fear. Humanity will act according to its own judgment, not yours. This is our final statement." The screen went black. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then chaos returned, but this time it was pure panic. Delegates shouted across the room. Some wanted to send fleets to demand an explanation. Others whispered that attacking Earth would be suicide. The speaker's voice shook as he tried to speak. This cannot stand. We must restore contact. If humanity leaves the council, the entire balance collapses." But the truth was already sinking in. The humans weren't bluffing. They were walking away. Behind the panic and anger, a quiet fear spread among those who truly understood what had just happened. Humanity had not threatened war. They didn't need to. Every species knew that when humans made a decision, they didn't go back on it. And now they had decided that the galaxy wasn't worth talking to. Hours turned into days. Emergency meetings were called in every system. Fleets were placed on standby. The galaxy's markets crashed overnight. Trade ships turned back mid-route. The Council tried to issue a joint statement claiming they were in peaceful dialogue with Earth, but everyone knew it was a lie. Humanity wasn't answering anyone. A week later, intelligence reports started leaking. Satellites near the Sol system had detected unusual activity. Massive energy readings near Jupiter. Fleets moving in tight formations, construction signals that could only mean one thing. Earth was building something. No one knew what. And that uncertainty was worse than any weapon. Across the galaxy, old fears returned. Every civilization remembered the wars before humanity joined. The chaos, the endless fighting, the greed. The Council had created peace through control, but it was fragile. And now, with Earth gone, that peace was cracking. Some worlds began withdrawing from the Council, preparing for whatever came next. Others strengthened their borders, installing new defense systems and rearming old fleets. For the first time in generations, every species was preparing for war, not against each other, but against the unknown reaction of humanity. Yet, in the quiet corners of the galaxy, some spoke differently. There were races that had worked closely with humans, who had fought beside them and seen their loyalty. They said humanity didn't act out of hate but out of principle. They believed Earth was simply tired of the Council's endless corruption and hypocrisy. To them, this was not a threat, it was a warning. Meanwhile, in the empty hall of the Council, the High Speaker sat alone. The other delegates had left, the chamber quiet for the first time in centuries. He looked out at the stars through the transparent walls, his hands trembling slightly. He whispered to himself, "They warned us this would happen." He remembered the last human ambassador, a calm, confident woman who once said, "If the Council keeps using peace as a weapon, one day peace will die on its own." He hadn't understood her words then. But now they made sense. The speaker knew that without humanity, the galaxy was drifting into unknown territory. Diplomacy had failed. Trust had collapsed. And deep in his heart, he knew something terrible, something unstoppable was coming. Far away, beyond the reach of the Council's scanners, the humans continued their silence. No one could see what was happening on Earth. No probes returned. No messages came out. But one thing was certain, humanity was not gone. They were simply waiting. And the galaxy could only wonder what they were waiting for. Because when humans decide to stop talking, it usually means they're getting ready to act. The silence that followed Earth's message spread like a storm across the galaxy. It reached every world, every fleet, every corner of civilization where humans had once stood side by side with other species. That short, calm transmission had carried more power than any weapon could. Humanity had not shouted, they had not threatened. They had simply said no more. In the Council's capital, the halls that were once busy with diplomats were now filled with fear and uncertainty. The great display boards that usually showed trade routes and treaties now displayed a single word in red: unreachable. Every attempt to contact Earth ended the same way. No signal. No response, no acknowledgement. Humanity had shut down every diplomatic channel, from the smallest outpost to the grandest embassy. It was as if a door had been closed and locked forever. For the first few days, the Council tried to remain calm. They told the galaxy that Earth was only taking time to restructure diplomatic relations. But the truth could not be hidden. Everyone had seen the transmission. Everyone had heard the tone in that human voice. It wasn't the sound of anger. It was finality. They weren't asking for space. They were done. Inside the Council chamber, the mood was heavy. Delegates whispered in fear, wondering what Earth's next move might be. The humans had been part of every major defense treaty, every emergency plan, and every crisis resolution. Without them, the structure that held the galaxy together was cracking. In one corner of the room, a representative from a trade world spoke nervously. "They can't just leave us like this. Half our fleets rely on human-built engines. Our trade routes go through their space." Another delegate replied sharply. "Then pray they keep those routes open. If Earth closes its borders, half the galaxy's economy will collapse in a week." That statement hit everyone hard. The humans were not just warriors, they were builders, engineers, scientists. Their technology powered half the galaxy's systems, and now all that could vanish. As the days passed, panic began to grow. Civilizations that once laughed at Earth's emotional species now found themselves terrified. They had always believed humans were unpredictable but cooperative until now. No one knew what a silent humanity meant. Then, exactly 10 days after Earth's message, another transmission arrived. It came suddenly, without warning, cutting through every signal band used by the Council. Every display screen flickered again and the same faceless image appeared. Calm, quiet, unmistakably human. "This is the final notice from the Terran Command," the voice said. The chamber went still. Every representative listened in silence, hearts pounding. "Humanity will no longer be part of the Galactic Council. We have seen enough of your politics, your power games, and your endless manipulation of peace. You speak of unity while dividing worlds behind closed doors. You build treaties not for safety, but for control." The voice paused for a moment, as if giving the galaxy time to understand. "We will not take part in that anymore. Our fleets will remain within Terran space. Our people will not interfere in your conflicts. Do not enter our systems, and we will not enter yours. Live how you choose, but do not expect our help when your world burns from the same greed you refuse to end." The screen flickered once and went black again. No one moved. No one spoke. The message was simple, but the meaning was heavy. Humanity was leaving the galaxy to its fate. Then, all at once, the chamber exploded with noise. Delegates shouted, arguing, panicking. Some called for an emergency plan to restore contact with Earth. Others said it was too late. One delegate yelled, "We should send fleets to force them back to the table." But the laughter that followed wasn't mocking. It was fearful. Everyone knew that was suicide, because if humanity truly wanted to disappear, no one could stop them. The speaker tried to calm the room, but his words were lost in the noise. The fear was spreading faster than reason. Without humanity, the Council was like a body that had lost its heartbeat. Every major operation depended on Terran support. From communication satellites to border security, human systems were everywhere. And now all those systems were shutting down one by one. A few worlds tried to send envoys of their own, private missions, small ships, hoping to speak to Earth directly. None of them ever came back. Some reported being stopped by automated defense systems before being cut off entirely. Others vanished without trace near the outer edges of Sol. The message was clear. Earth wasn't just done talking. They were closing the door completely. Soon rumors started spreading. People claimed they had seen human warships moving silently beyond the edge of mapped space. Others said that entire fleets had disappeared from known locations. The Council tried to dismiss these as false reports, but the whispers grew louder. "The humans are preparing for something," they said. "Something big." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, normal life began to crumble. Trade routes through human space were closed, and smaller worlds that relied on Terran supplies began to suffer. Fuel shortages hit the colonies. Communications blackouts caused panic on frontier worlds. It became clear just how deeply humanity's presence had kept everything stable. One by one, worlds began pulling away from the Council's authority. They no longer trusted its leadership. Some accused the Council of provoking Earth, saying that arrogance and greed had pushed humanity away. Others blamed the humans, calling them traitors for abandoning the galaxy. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Earth hadn't left out of hate. They left because they saw the corruption no one wanted to admit existed. The humans had always been strange to other races. They fought fiercely, but they also showed mercy. They could be unpredictable, but their word was solid once given. When they said something was wrong, they meant it. And now, by cutting all ties, they had made the strongest statement possible. In the Council's private archives, the High Speaker replayed the human message over and over again. Each time it felt heavier. The words, "Do not expect our help when your world burns," echoed like a warning. He knew what that meant. Humanity wasn't threatening to destroy anyone. They were warning what would happen without them. The galaxy had used humans as soldiers of peace, as shields against chaos, and as tools of convenience. But they had never truly listened to them. Now the galaxy would have to survive on its own. Weeks later, as more systems began to fall into disorder, the Council met again. The chamber was quieter now. Many seats were empty. Some species had already withdrawn, while others refused to attend meetings altogether. The unity that had once held the stars together was falling apart piece by piece. In that silence, one delegate finally spoke. They warned us. Years ago, they told us this would happen. They said peace built on lies cannot last. No one argued. Everyone knew she was right. For the next several days, the council tried to send new messages, pleas for negotiation, offers of cooperation, even apologies. But none reached Earth. The humans had shut their gates completely. Out near the edges of known space, ships passing close to Sol reported seeing massive structures in orbit, dark shapes silhouetted against the sun. No one knew what they were, but they were clearly artificial. The readings suggested energy levels far beyond anything the council possessed. Fear turned to dread. If those structures were new human fleets or stations, then Earth was not retreating. They were preparing. Preparing for something the galaxy wasn't ready for. And so, the Great Galactic Council, which had ruled for centuries, found itself trembling at the thought of one species that had simply said no. On thousands of worlds, the people began to whisper about Earth, not as an ally or an enemy, but as a force beyond comprehension. Some called them protectors turned ghosts. Others called them the sleeping giants, but the truth was simpler. Humanity hadn't vanished. They were watching. And the galaxy knew it. Every leader, every general, every diplomat could feel it. The silent presence of a species that had outgrown the Council's control. One message had changed everything. One act of refusal had shaken the entire order of the stars. And somewhere, deep within their hidden systems, humanity prepared quietly, while the rest of the galaxy wondered if they had just witnessed the end of peace, or the beginning of something far greater. The galaxy was no longer calm. Ever since Earth's final message, fear had spread faster than light. What began as political tension inside the council chamber had now reached every corner of space. Worlds that once called themselves allies were now quietly building defenses. Fleets that had not seen battle in centuries were being rearmed and refueled. The message from Earth was clear. They were done talking. But the question that haunted everyone was simple. What will they do next? Inside the council's main hall, the leaders of hundreds of civilizations gathered again. This time there was no talk of peace or trade. Every word was about humanity. A cold silence filled the air as the speaker looked around the vast chamber. We cannot pretend this is normal, he said. Humanity has withdrawn from the council, and that affects every one of us. If we do nothing, we may lose control of the galaxy entirely. But before he could continue, a representative from one of the outer worlds interrupted. Lose control? We already have. Look around you. Half our colonies depend on human technology. If they decide to stop sharing it, our fleets won't even fly. The words hit hard. Everyone knew it was true. Humans had not only built ships, they had improved almost every system the council relied on. From navigation grids to defense networks, Earth's engineers had helped build the foundation of modern galactic life. And now, that foundation was cracking. Across the galaxy, smaller governments were starting to panic. They didn't trust the council to protect them anymore. In fact, some believed that the council itself had angered the humans in the first place. The more people talked, the more fear grew. In private, council leaders held secret meetings. They didn't want the public to know how frightened they really were. Behind closed doors, arguments filled the air. They'll attack soon, one general said. You know how humans are. They've done this before. Go silent, prepare, then strike. Another leader shook his head. You don't understand them. They don't want war. They want respect. We pushed them too far. But the general refused to believe that. Respect? You call this respect? They shut down communication, blocked access to their systems, and cut ties with every ally. That's not peace, that's a warning. The room went quiet. No one wanted to admit it, but the general was right. When humans became silent, it usually meant they were planning something. And the rumors coming in from the edges of Sol's system made things worse. Deep space sensors reported strange readings, massive energy spikes near the asteroid belt, construction sites the size of moons, and movement patterns that didn't match any known fleet formation. The council ordered the information to be classified, but leaks spread fast. The galaxy's networks exploded with speculation. Earth is building a super fleet. They're making a new weapon. They're preparing for war. No one knew what was true. But fear didn't need proof to spread. Soon, border worlds began forming their own defense alliances. Old rivalries resurfaced. Civilizations that had once relied on human protection were now looking for new allies. And those who had once mocked humans for being emotional and reckless were the ones most afraid now. Meanwhile, inside the Council's War Department, the mood was grim. The strategists gathered around a large holographic map of known human space. Red lines marked the border zones, the areas now considered off-limits. One of the officers spoke in a low tone. Their silence isn't random. They're controlling information. Every probe we've sent into their territory disappears. Every ship that gets too close loses contact. The others stared at the map, uneasy. Do we know what they're building? Someone asked. The officer shook his head. No, but whatever it is, it's massive. The speaker leaned forward, his face pale. Then we have to be careful. We can't afford another war. If they attack, they won't attack first, another voice interrupted. It was one of the older council members, calm and thoughtful. Humans don't start wars out of pride. They react. Something must have happened to make them walk away. If we can find out what that was, maybe we can fix it. But the others didn't share that hope. Trust was already broken. The meeting ended without answers. Each leader left with the same fear in mind. What if humanity has already decided their fate? Outside the chamber, the galaxy continued to change. News channels were filled with panic. Citizens started protesting, demanding that their governments make peace with Earth before it was too late. Economies began to shake as trade routes through human space stayed closed. Even major corporations, once rich from interstellar commerce, were collapsing overnight. And still, Earth said nothing. The silence was worse than any weapon. It made every rumor believable, every fear real. Some even began to believe that humans had discovered something powerful, something beyond what the Council could control. In one of the border sectors, a small patrol ship from a neutral world made a mistake. They crossed into restricted Terran space, unaware that their navigation system had drifted off course. Within seconds, every alarm on their ship went off. A deep voice came through the comms, human but not friendly. You have entered Terran-controlled territory. Turn back immediately. The crew panicked and tried to explain, but before they could finish, the voice repeated, this time colder. Turn back now. They turned. They didn't wait to see what would happen next. When they returned to Council space, they spread the story. And with it came another wave of fear. That one short encounter showed everyone that Earth wasn't bluffing. They weren't hiding. They were watching, carefully. Within weeks, the Council's unity started breaking apart. Some worlds proposed building a defensive alliance in case of human retaliation. Others refused, saying any such act might be seen as a threat. Old grudges reignited between races that had been calm for centuries. Without humanity's presence to keep them honest, everyone started thinking of their own survival first. The speaker knew what was happening, but couldn't stop it. They're afraid, he said quietly to his advisors. Not just of humans, but of what comes next. They've never lived in a galaxy without Earth watching over them. One of the advisors replied, then maybe that's what this is about. Maybe humanity wants to see who can stand without them. That thought lingered, because deep down everyone knew the truth. The galaxy's peace had never been built on true unity. It had been built on fear of what would happen if humanity got angry. And now, with the humans gone, the cracks were showing everywhere. The speaker spent long nights staring out at the stars from his office, wondering if he should reach out one more time. But every attempt had failed. Every signal to Earth was ignored. The humans had locked their systems tight. Still, he couldn't help whispering to himself, why now? Why leave us now? He didn't know that on the other side of those distant stars, humanity was watching too. They weren't gone. They were silent but not still. They had seen enough of the Council's greed, enough of its false peace. Now they were preparing for a future where they wouldn't have to ask for permission or explain themselves. And as the galaxy trembled in fear of human retaliation, Earth simply continued in silence, strong, quiet, and waiting. Everyone was watching the skies, expecting the day when the humans would return. But no one knew what that return would mean. Would it be war, or would it be something far greater, something the galaxy had never imagined? Until then, fear ruled everything. Not fear of destruction, but fear of the unknown, fear of the humans who had stopped talking. Because in the galaxy's long history, one truth had always been certain. When humans decide they've had enough, something always changes forever. The galaxy had grown quiet in a way it had never known before. Not peaceful quiet, but the heavy, tense quiet that fills the spaces before a storm. Weeks had passed since Earth's final message, and still, there was no reply. No signals, no fleets, no diplomats. Humanity had vanished from the networks, and the emptiness weighed on every civilization. Everywhere the whispers began. They are watching us. They are preparing. They are waiting. And no one knew what for. The Council tried to maintain order. Orders were sent to fleets, new patrols were deployed, and communications were expanded. But each effort ended in frustration. Probes sent near the Sol system disappeared. Fleets that approached were blocked by automated systems with precision no one could match. Not once did the humans communicate. They simply acted, and the galaxy could only watch. In the council chamber, the atmosphere had turned from panic to unease. Delegates no longer argued as much. They spoke quietly, as if speaking too loudly might trigger something they couldn't see. The speaker, usually calm and commanding, now spent hours staring at the stars through the transparent dome of the chamber. He traced the path of human fleets, tried to predict their strategy, and failed every time. One of the newer representatives, a young delegate from a frontier colony, finally spoke. "Do you think they are preparing for war?" The room went silent. The question hung heavy. An older counselor finally replied, "No. Humans do not prepare for war unless forced. They do not strike without reason. What they are preparing for, we cannot imagine. That is what scares us." And indeed, fear spread faster than any fleet. Across hundreds of worlds, civilizations began adjusting their plans. Trade routes that had existed for centuries were abandoned. Colonies that had been stable were now reinforcing their defenses. Even the smallest outposts installed automated weapons, built walls, and drilled crews in emergency procedures. Human silence had created chaos. Not through attack, but through absence. Their withdrawal was a ripple that grew into a tidal wave. Meanwhile, intelligence reports continued to arrive. Odd reports that no one could fully understand. Massive energy spikes were detected near Jupiter and Saturn, as if the planet-sized moons were being used for something big. Small patrol ships reported unusual movements, shadows of objects too large to be any normal fleet. And yet, when anyone tried to send a larger vessel, Earth's defenses prevented approach. It was as if the humans had created a barrier the galaxy could not penetrate. In private, the Council admitted what everyone already knew. They did not understand Earth anymore. For decades, humans had been part of the system, predictable in their unpredictability. They had fought in wars, built empires, and negotiated peace, but they had never vanished like this. Never had a civilization so powerful simply refused to communicate. Outside the chamber, panic mixed with curiosity. People speculated endlessly about what Earth might be doing. Some believed humanity was building a super fleet, far larger than anything in Council space. Others thought they were constructing weapons that could destroy entire sectors. No one knew for sure. The human silence had created the perfect unknown, and unknown was terrifying. Fleets stationed near Council borders were given strict orders. Approach human territory and be destroyed. Do not provoke. Observe from afar. But even those orders could not calm the nerves of officers and pilots. They all knew that the humans were not idle, that every construction signal, every energy spike, was a silent warning. Do not interfere. In one small sector, a patrol commander reported back after a tense mission. "We were close," he said, voice shaking. "But before we could see anything, every system went dark. Communication, sensors, everything. It's like they swallowed the entire area. And yet, the energy readings remain. Something is happening there, something big." The Council took note, but fear had already spread beyond their control. Worlds were acting independently now. Some began stockpiling resources, building secret fleets and forming alliances outside Council authority. They didn't trust each other, not anymore, and they certainly didn't trust the Council to protect them from the humans. And all the while, Earth remained silent. The galaxy began to realize something else. Humanity's absence was teaching them a hard lesson. They had grown dependent on humans, relying on their technology, their protection, and their influence. But without humans present, every flaw, every weakness in galactic infrastructure became visible. Systems that had worked smoothly for centuries were now failing. Trade networks collapsed. Communication grids malfunctioned. Border defenses fell into disrepair because the humans had once been the unseen hand, keeping everything in balance. Some leaders attempted to spin the situation positively, saying that this could be an opportunity to strengthen their civilizations, to become self-reliant. But even they could not ignore the creeping dread. Humanity had not just withdrawn, they had left a void, and no one knew how to fill it. Meanwhile, rumors and speculation grew into obsession. Across the galaxy, news feeds were filled with reports of shadow fleets and unseen weapons. Every new signal, every anomaly, was traced back to Earth. Scientists and military experts tried to analyze the strange energy readings, but all their calculations failed. Whatever humans were doing, it was beyond the galaxy's understanding. In private meetings, council leaders admitted that their fear was not about war, it was about control. They had always assumed humanity could be reasoned with, guided, or persuaded. Now they realized that humans had no interest in control, no desire to negotiate, and no reason to explain themselves. The galaxy was no longer in charge. It was being observed. Even the ordinary citizens began to feel the change. Merchants on trade routes whispered about the dangers of passing through systems near Earth. Families in colonies far from Sol worried that a disruption in supplies could leave them without food or water. Stories spread about fleets disappearing and communication satellites going dark. No one wanted to admit it, but the humans' silence had touched every life, and the humans did not speak. They did not move. They simply watched quietly as the galaxy adjusted around them. In the council chamber, the speaker addressed the remaining delegates. "We must learn from this," he said. "We must understand why they left, what we did wrong, and what this silence means. If we cannot reach them, we must prepare for a galaxy without their guidance." No one disagreed, but no one could say how. For centuries, civilizations had relied on humans as stabilizers. Without them, every system was vulnerable. And yet, even in the growing fear, some voices spoke differently. Historians and scientists reminded the galaxy of something important. Humans had always acted with purpose, even when their actions seemed reckless. Their silence was not a sign of weakness, it was strategy. And strategy was something the galaxy had not fully appreciated until now. As days turned into weeks, the patterns became clearer. Earth was not responding because they did not need to. They were not hiding because they were afraid. They were preparing for a future where their choices mattered and where the council no longer held power over them. And so, the galaxy waited. Every world, every fleet, every council member held their breath. Every movement, every energy spike, every shadow near Sol was studied and analyzed. The humans remained invisible, silent, and unstoppable. The silence itself had become a weapon. It had broken trust, shattered alliances, and made every civilization question their own strength. No message, no fleet, no signal could communicate more clearly than the absence of the humans. And the galaxy knew one terrifying truth. This silence would not end until humanity decided it should. Until then, everyone could only watch, wait, and fear what would come next. Because when humans stop speaking, it is never because nothing is happening. Something always is. And the galaxy had no choice but to imagine the worst. The galaxy was beginning to unravel. Without humanity's presence, the fragile web of alliances, trade agreements, and mutual understanding that had held civilizations together for centuries started to fray. Everywhere the signs were clear. Border disputes that had been resolved years ago were flaring up again. Trade routes once patrolled and protected by human fleets were now vulnerable. Pirates, smugglers, and opportunistic powers moved freely, exploiting the vacuum left behind. Inside the Galactic Council, chaos replaced order. The chambers that had once been filled with polite debate now echoed with anger, blame, and desperation. Delegates accused one another of failing to prevent humanity's withdrawal. Some said the Council had provoked humans through corruption, lies, or arrogance. Others insisted that humans were traitors for abandoning the galaxy in its time of need. The speaker, usually a calm and commanding presence, could only watch as the room descended into chaos. "Enough," he shouted one day, banging his fist on the desk. "We must act together! Otherwise everything we have built will collapse." But unity was no longer possible. Old rivalries, dormant for decades, re-emerged with renewed vigor. Civilizations that had long since made peace suddenly eyed each other with suspicion. Fleets stationed near neutral systems began exchanging warnings, sometimes even firing warning shots. The fear of humans had created not just panic, but mistrust among every species. Trade, which had once connected the galaxy, started to fall apart. Merchants abandoned routes that passed near human space, even if it meant higher costs or longer journeys. Supply chains crumbled. Food, medicine, and fuel became scarce in distant colonies. And because humans had controlled so much of the galaxy's technology, no one could fully repair what was failing. Communications grids went down, power systems failed, and old conflicts, long thought forgotten, started to resurface. Small worlds suffered the most. Isolated colonies, dependent on human-designed systems, found themselves without assistance. Satellites failed, leaving entire planets blind to incoming threats. Mining stations lost contact with supply fleets. Even planetary defenses, automated but reliant on human software, began malfunctioning. Council leaders tried to respond, but they were slow, inefficient, and divided. Each new crisis highlighted their weakness. Humans had been the invisible backbone of the galaxy's stability, and without them, no one knew how to hold things together. Meanwhile, humans themselves remained silent. There was no warning, no communication, no interference. The galaxy could only guess at what they were doing, but every guess fueled fear. Some said Earth was building massive fleets capable of conquering entire sectors. Others believed they were developing new technology that could end conflicts in an instant, or destroy them. Every theory, every rumor made the Council's leaders more desperate. In one particularly tense meeting, a representative from a border sector spoke bluntly. "We cannot rely on hope anymore. Humanity has abandoned us. We must defend ourselves against each other first, because if we wait for them, it may be too late." The words hung heavy. They were true. With humans gone, there was no force capable of restraining the galaxy's more aggressive civilizations, and some were already preparing to take advantage of the situation. Alliances that had held for centuries began to crumble. Systems that had once trusted one another turned on each other over trade disputes, territorial claims, or old grudges. Military leaders stationed in contested regions began to act independently, issuing orders without consulting the Council. Every day the galaxy grew a little more chaotic. In some sectors, fleets fired warning shots at neighbors over minor border violations. In others, small skirmishes broke out, leaving casualties that would have been unthinkable just months before. The humans' absence had created not just fear, it had created opportunity. And some civilizations were willing to take that opportunity no matter the cost. The Council tried to issue statements of reassurance, claiming they were in control. But no one believed them. Citizens, traders, and even minor leaders whispered that the Council's power was an illusion, that it had only existed because of human oversight. And when humans were gone, the illusion shattered. Even the Council's own fleets were struggling. Without human engineers and technology, ships failed more often, weapons misfired, and repairs took longer than ever. The confidence that had carried the galaxy through centuries of peace was gone. Every commander knew that if humans decided to act, nothing the Council had built could stop them. Meanwhile, the common citizens of the galaxy felt the effects most acutely. Food shortages spread across multiple systems. Energy rationing became necessary on heavily populated planets. Communications outages left entire cities cut off from their governments. Panic, frustration, and fear spread faster than any fleet. People began to wonder whether the humans would ever return, or if their absence would leave the galaxy to tear itself apart. Some leaders tried to use this fear to their advantage. They rallied citizens with speeches about strength, independence, and self-reliance. They claimed that humanity's absence was a chance for civilizations to prove themselves. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. Without humans, the galaxy was weak, and still Earth said nothing. No messages, no fleets, no intervention. The silence was absolute. And in that silence, the Council realized the terrifying reality. The humans were not leaving because they were weak. They were leaving because they could afford to. Because they no longer needed to participate in a system built on fear and control. The more the Council tried to respond, the more obvious it became that they were failing. Borders were harder to defend. Trade routes were collapsing. Alliances were breaking. And every new crisis reminded them of one fact. Humanity had been the stabilizing force that none of them realized they depended on. In the midst of this collapse, some representatives still tried to plan for diplomacy. Messages were drafted, fleets were prepared to deliver envoys, and peaceful approaches were considered. But every attempt failed. Humanity did not respond, did not engage, did not appear. They simply acted on their own timetable, quiet and deliberate. The Council came to a grim conclusion. The galaxy would have to survive without humans. But surviving was different from thriving. Without their guidance, protection, and influence, every species was forced to face the harsh truth. The systems they had relied upon for centuries were fragile. Peace had been maintained not through trust or morality, but through human presence. And now that presence was gone. Chaos continued to spread. Some fleets acted preemptively, attacking neighbors over minor grievances. Trade disputes escalated into open skirmishes. Entire sectors began fortifying themselves in preparation for conflict, unsure whether the threat was coming from humans, neighboring civilizations, or both. The collapse of unity became undeniable. The Galactic Council, once a powerful governing body capable of managing hundreds of worlds, was now reduced to issuing statements, trying desperately to maintain order. But the truth was clear. Humans had left, and without them, unity was impossible. And yet, in the darkness of this growing chaos, one fact remained. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy out of malice. They had not destroyed anything, attacked anyone, or taken resources. Their absence was not aggression, it was a statement. A statement that peace built on fear, lies, and control could not last forever. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson. Humans had never been just another species. They were a force that demanded respect, attention, and honesty, and when that respect was not given, they withdrew, not with fire or destruction, but with silence. Now, as the Council watched fleets skirmish, trade collapse, and trust evaporate, they understood what had been lost. Humanity had been the invisible hand keeping chaos at bay, and without them the galaxy was slowly, inevitably falling apart. Somewhere deep in the outer systems, humans continued their silent preparation. They did not celebrate the collapse, nor did they mourn it. They simply observed, quiet and patient. And every civilization in the galaxy, every leader, every fleet commander, every citizen knew one thing. The humans' absence was only the beginning. The collapse of unity was not just political or military. It was social, economic, and cultural. Entire civilizations were learning, in the hardest way possible, what it meant to exist without humanity watching over them. And while the chaos spread, the silence of Earth remained absolute, a constant reminder that humans were no longer bound by the rules of the Council, the expectations of allies, or the demands of others. The galaxy had lost its backbone, its balance had vanished, and everyone, from the smallest colony to the largest empire, could only wait and wonder what would happen when humanity finally chose to act again. Because one truth was undeniable. The collapse of unity was complete, and it had been caused not by war, not by weapons, but by the quiet, deliberate withdrawal of the humans who had once held it all together. The galaxy had never felt so small and yet so vast. Every civilization that had ever relied on the Galactic Council now felt the weight of absence pressing down on them. Trade routes were broken, alliances shattered, and fleets scattered across the stars. And still Earth said nothing. Weeks had turned into months. The humans remained silent, watching from the shadows, leaving the galaxy to unravel on its own. Every attempt to communicate, every fleet sent to deliver messages was met with the same result: nothing. Yet the silence was not empty. It carried a presence that every species could feel. Fleet commanders reported strange readings near the Sol system, energy patterns too precise to be natural, massive construction signals that vanished before anyone could get close, and fleets moving in perfect coordination without ever being detected. The humans were silent, yes, but they were not idle. Inside the Council, panic had shifted into dread. Delegates no longer debated loudly, they whispered. They no longer sent envoys, they prepared defenses. They no longer trusted one another. They watched their neighbors carefully. The galaxy's peace, fragile for centuries, had crumbled without humans to hold it together. Then one day, a transmission cut across every communication channel in the known galaxy. Every display, every comm link, every private feed carried the same signal. It was sudden, startling, and unmistakably human. A figure appeared on the screens. Not clearly visible, just a silhouette, standing against a bright, unidentifiable background. The voice that followed was calm, measured, and cold in a way that immediately demanded attention. "This is a message from the Terran Command," it began, "to every civilization in the galaxy, from council leaders to the smallest colony. We speak now for the first time in months." The chamber of the council went silent. Representatives stared at the screens, unsure if they were seeing reality or a warning from some distant dream. "You have seen our absence," the voice continued. "You have felt the chaos it created, and you have learned what you rely upon. For centuries, humanity was a silent stabilizer in your galaxy. Our presence restrained your greed, your violence, and your arrogance. Without us, the cracks became visible. You know now what happens when humans are no longer part of your councils, your trade networks, or your wars." Every word hung heavy in the air. It was not a threat. It was a lesson, and every being listening felt its weight. "We do not seek vengeance," the voice went on. "We have not attacked. We have not interfered. Yet we have observed. You have learned how fragile your systems truly are. You have seen how quickly distrust spreads, how alliances crumble, and how easily chaos takes root. That is your reality without humanity." The room was quiet, but fear ran through every heart. They understood what was being said. Humanity had not acted out of aggression. They had acted out of principle. They had allowed the galaxy to face the consequences of its own actions, of its own corruption and reliance on human power. "Let this be clear," the voice continued. "We warned you decades ago that peace built on fear is not peace at all. You ignored the warning. You treated cooperation as weakness, negotiation as opportunity, and diplomacy as manipulation. Now you see the result. For some delegates, the message was horrifying. For others, it was a revelation. They had been living under the illusion that order was natural, that the Council's authority alone maintained stability. Now they realized the truth. Humans had been the backbone of their civilization, and their withdrawal had exposed the fragility of everything. The transmission continued. "We do not act as tyrants. We do not enforce our will on others. Humanity acts in freedom, guided by reason and principle. You may fear our power, but we do not wield it recklessly. You may imagine retaliation, but there is none. This is not a threat. This is a demonstration of what we choose to be: principled, vigilant, and independent." Many council members shook in their seats. They had expected anger, a warning, a declaration of war, but not this. The humans were teaching them a lesson, and it was far more powerful than any fleet, any weapon, any policy could ever be. "You now have a choice," the voice said. "You may learn from your mistakes, rebuild your systems, and govern yourselves with honesty and respect. Or you may continue as before and suffer the consequences of your own actions. Humanity will watch quietly until we see that balance restored. We will not return to negotiate until we are certain the galaxy has learned what we taught." With that, the screens went dark. Silence returned, heavier than ever. For hours, no one in the council moved. No one spoke. The room was filled with an eerie understanding. Humans had left, humans had returned in silence, and humans had changed the galaxy forever. Outside the chamber, the galaxy itself seemed to pause. Fleets held their positions. Trade ships stopped mid-route. Colonies held their breath. The humans had sent no fleets, no weapons, no enforcers. Yet their presence, simply knowing they were watching, was more powerful than any fleet ever assembled. Some leaders realized that fear alone had reshaped behavior. Fleets that had been planning aggressive moves against neighbors pulled back. Worlds that had been preparing to betray allies reconsidered. Humanity's silence, their quiet observation, was teaching control and restraint in a way no council mandate ever could. And yet, the lesson came with a warning. Chaos had already spread too far to be fully contained. Civilizations had grown reckless in their absence. Resources had been mismanaged. Border disputes had escalated. Trust had collapsed. Humans had returned not to fix these problems, but to show that the consequences of ignoring principle were real and unavoidable. In private, council members admitted their fear openly. "We underestimated them," one said quietly to another. "We thought they would return, speak, negotiate, maybe even forgive us. But they did not. They watched, and now we see ourselves as they see us." "Yes," another replied, voice trembling, "and that is far worse than war. At least in war you can fight back, but this is a reckoning without fire." Across the galaxy the message spread. Colonies debated the meaning. Fleets and governments reassessed priorities. Historians and philosophers began documenting the human lesson: that power alone does not create respect, that peace built on fear is fragile, and that the absence of a principled force can reveal the weakness of the strongest empires. Meanwhile, humans remained silent in their own systems. They did not appear, did not attack, and did not interfere. They simply existed, preparing, observing, and waiting. Their presence was invisible but undeniable. Every civilization in the galaxy knew the truth. The humans were no longer bound by their councils, by their alliances, or by their rules. The galaxy had changed forever. The collapse of order, the fear, the absence of humans, all had taught one undeniable lesson. Humanity acted on principle, not fear. And when humans choose to watch rather than act, the galaxy itself feels the weight of that choice. The Council, weakened and humbled, had no answers. Leaders across hundreds of worlds understood that the human silence was more powerful than any weapon. For the first time, civilizations realized that humanity had never been just another species. They had been a force of accountability, a measure against chaos, a quiet guardian of stability. And now, humanity had withdrawn, leaving the galaxy to face itself. Somewhere beyond the known stars, humans prepared quietly. Their fleets moved with precision, their systems operated flawlessly, and their technologies advanced in ways the rest of the galaxy could barely imagine. But they did not act aggressively. They waited. They watched. They had given their lesson, and now they awaited the galaxy's response. The galaxy had learned what it meant to rely on humans, and what it meant when humans stopped participating. And as civilizations struggled to maintain order on their own, one truth became clear to everyone. When humans finally choose to act again, the consequences would be nothing short of unimaginable. For now, silence ruled the stars, but the warning from the shadows had been sent and no one would forget it. The humans were no longer part of the Council. They had not attacked. They had not interfered. But through absence, through silence, and through sheer presence, they had reshaped the galaxy forever, and every civilization understood the same truth. The humans would watch, and when the time came, they would act. The galaxy would never be the same again.